All right. It is my great pleasure to welcome all of you here today. My name is Maurice Khadebe, and Head and Director of Wits Business School. As a leading business school in Africa, it is important to have an impactful contribution to our nation and the world around us. We do this through impactful public discourse, and this is why we're so passionate about our leadership dialogues. We've hosted a number of these leadership dialogues and conversation with eminent business people in the last 18 months or so, and leaders who have set a bar higher for the next generation, and leaders who inspire us through their vision to make this world a better place, who embrace particularly the 3 or 4 values that we at WBS with strong. We advocate excellence, integrity, collaboration, and sustainability. Sustainability because the world is facing the existential threat to mankind, and therefore it's important that we all must put our hands on deck to make sure that this world is sustainable for the next generation. So today it is my privilege to welcome such a leader, and that is none other than Dr. Shirley Zinn, who come from humble beginnings, overcame many challenges on her journey to become one of this country's most celebrated and respected business leader. The title of her book, which Professor Mills will tell you about, is Swimming Upstream. In other words, it's quite clear that swimming upstream has been a great challenge in her life, but she takes incredible strength and courage to rise above one's circumstances, to go against the tide. Shirley now uses her own life experience to motivate and inspire other people, especially disadvantaged youth and women. I told her earlier on, I said, look, I've got 3 girls. I still call them girls, but they are women now. One is 25, another one is 30. They're all entering the corporate world now, and they are looking for role models. So I've told Shirley she dare not fail because all my little girls will be looking after her, and she's done extremely well already. So there's no reason to even worry about that. Shirley started her career at a high school as a high school teacher, and ultimately became the group head of human resource at Woolworth Holdings. Ramils will tell you we hosted the CEO and a former chairman of Woolworths, Simon Suzman, a very great man. And I'm sure Shirley was working along with him. She has held many other HR positions in leading organizations, among them head of human resources at Standard Bank, deputy global head HR for Standard Bank Group, and a group executive HR at Nedbank, general manager of human resource at SARS. She has her own company, Shirley Zinn Consulting Company, which provide consulting services, advisory services in human resource, transformation, leadership, and education. The list of the boards she has served on is too long to recite here. In fact, it's blue chip companies. She has served on the Sanlam, MTN, Spur, VA Waterfront. She's the chair of VA Waterfront. So next time you are visiting Cape Town and you're enjoying the waterfront, remember Shirley is the person behind it. In fact, last week I was there, Shirley. I really enjoyed being there and eating in a nice restaurant. She's a non-executive director of World Wildlife Fund and chair of RAMCO there, and executive director of BCG, Boston Consulting Group. Just send my regards to Igor there. Boston Consulting Group is a great team. I'm very proud of them. I've worked with them for many, many years and still working with them. It's a great company. Shirley is a sought after keynote speaker, a coach and a mentor, and an author, and a recipient of multiple awards. If I can mention them here, I'll take all the time for this great conversation. So at this point, let me tell you also about her education. She's got a master's of education from the University of Western Cape and a doctorate in education from Harvard University. A well-learned leader. Dr. Zinn, it is a great honor to have you as our guest this afternoon. We've been looking forward to this conversation. Thank you so much for giving of your precious time. Professor Mills, our seasoned leader and in this area, great moderator, over to you, my brother. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maurice. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mills Soko, Professor of International Business and Strategy at Wits Business School, and I too welcome you all to this WBS Leadership Dialogue. As Professor Kadebe mentioned, since we started this dialogue series at the beginning of last year, we have been able to get to know several inspirational leaders in business and academia. It is an honor for me to be able to facilitate these conversations. Thank you, Maurice, for introducing our guest today, Dr. Shirley Zinn. I too have been looking forward to this conversation. Thanks to all of you for joining us today too. You'll have an opportunity to ask questions of our guests. Please use the chat box to write your questions or comments, and I will relay them to Dr. Zinn. In case you miss anything, this event is being recorded and will be made available on our YouTube channel. Shirley, a very warm welcome to Wits Business School. We are pleased that you are able to join us today to talk broadly about your personal and corporate journeys, leadership, and the changing role of business. Good afternoon, Shirley.
Good afternoon, Professor Molsaka, and thank you very much, Professor Maurice Radebe, for the warm welcome, and good afternoon to our attendees online. Some are some faithful followers here and mentees, and also some new attendees. It's just wonderful to be here. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity to have this dialogue. And thanks for inviting me, Mills. I'm very happy to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you. Shirley, I'll start by talking about your childhood. You were born at the Somerset Hospital. I can visualize it, having lived in Cape for many years. And you grew up in the dusty dunes of Steenberg on the Cape Flats. Could you please tell us about what it was like for you growing up?
Thank you very, very much. So let's just get this one little minute detail out of the way very quickly. I was born in 1961, which makes me 61 in July. Interesting time to be alive, and an interesting journey to have traversed, given all the changes that have happened since. And my parents, for those of you who have some sense of where Steenberg is, it's as you come from the airport on the N2 and you're going towards Muizenberg, you go into the M5, and probably about 5 km or so before Muizenberg, on the left you will have the Lavender Hill Flats, and you will have on the right the old council houses that most people who had been really moved out of District 6 had to wait in a queue to get onto a list to get one of those kinds of homes back in the day. And those forced removals took many of us into the Cape Flats and into special arrangements by the apartheid regime of the day. And it is a tough place. It still is. Socioeconomic, huge socioeconomic challenges. And I don't need to go through the list of real problems that people face, of poverty, unemployment, violence, gender-based violence, alcohol and drugs. And a real challenge, especially for girls, growing up in that environment of great despair and not too much hope. But I was very fortunate to have been, to grow up in a home where we didn't have too much financially, but that where parents played a huge role in influencing and shaping what my future was to evolve into Mills.
Your parents, Shirley, had a huge influence in shaping your outlook on life. How did they do this? In what ways did they do this?
This is very interesting because they really, really humble people, didn't finish their high school, and had very little in terms of well, not just education that they didn't get, but also financially, and held very, very limited roles in terms of income, but understood the importance of education somehow, and that somehow education was going to be our liberation. I have a sister that's 3 years younger than I am. Her name is Mo, for those of you who know. And my dad used to sit us down from a very early age already and say things to us like, not fancy words like vision, but used to say, please don't get sucked into this place. Please try to make something of yourselves. It's literally making something of nothing when you think of those kinds of places where people have to live and survive literally. And he, eventually I said to him, what is it that you really would like us to achieve? And he said, just please get your matric. And then that was clarity, and I don't have to talk to this audience about the statistics and the numbers of children that get on in grade 1 and those, that get off at grade 12. It's probably half of us that make it through there. And it's really, really tough and sad when one thinks about, what happens to those who don't make it and what happens to those who fall off. But I was very grateful to have that advice from a very early age. And there was something that began to churn in me about, I should actually just make this work somehow. And my mother on the flip side, didn't talk about values in the sense that we would understand it intellectually, but she said, just have respect for people, just be humble, and not humble in a way that, people can walk all over you, but humble in a way that you're empathetic, you're able to question your assumptions, you're able to rethink your position on things, you're able to get up when you go down, that kind of humility. She also talked about, hard work, of course, and excellence. So I know that excellence is squarely in the Wits frame there after Prof. Maurice has just done the opening remarks there. And excellence is not about being perfect. It's about, because I think that's the other sort of extreme that one can fall into. Excellence is just trying to be the very best version of yourself every day, wherever you find yourself. And perhaps one or two other big things that she taught me was around, living in service of others, and kindness and generosity of spirit. And so these, I didn't know that a combination of vision and values were going to be, some of the things that informed my life so significantly ever since those very young days and those early conversations. But I'm truly grateful for having had those learnings early in life. And I really do appreciate and want to just, say how deeply grateful I am for having had those learnings at an early age, because those have been formed and shaped and influenced the way I've tried to navigate some very difficult and tumultuous times in my personal and professional life.
Yeah. Shirley, while doing research for this conversation, I discovered some fascinating nuggets about you. And one of those is that you are an ardent sports fanatic. I didn't know that. How did you develop your love for an interest in sports?
That is a very interesting discovery, Mills. Not too many in discussions like this have surfaced that, but I think my father had 8 brothers and a sister, and his father, and his 8 brothers were all part of a cricket club And I used to tag along with my uncles and my dad from a very young age, carry the cricket pads back then, and the balls and the bags and the hats and whatever. And I used to go along to all of the events, and now I'm married to my husband Kevin. I need to say this, in June it will be 30 years, Mills. So a great applause to Kevin for hanging in there with me for all this time. But also a very keen sportsman, very significant in athletics and swimming and volleyball and squash. And of course, his whole life has been dominated by sport. And so I've grown up in this, but I've also personally just, had always been very active. And I was supposed to, I will reveal this now because it's after the fact, but I was supposed to run my 10th Two Oceans half marathon 2 weeks ago. I had run 9 consecutively, and 3 in the last 3 years I wasn't able to do it because of COVID, of course. So I didn't put enough kilometers on, but I'm still ready to go. But I'm not saying that we must all do that, but I think what I learned from that is that it's your physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual well-being, all of those components work really well together. And I think that wellness has, gone up very high on the strategic agenda of many organizations. And I can just encourage everybody, you don't have to do the marathon, but, just smell the roses, take the breaks, take the walks, and take care of your body, because it helps you to take care of everything else and everybody else around you. So I'm very grateful for those early learnings and for keeping the kind of engine going in terms of my own health and fitness. Are we still here?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, you got interrupted there, but I think you're back. You're back on. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm not sure we are cut off, but I was just saying I'm very grateful for the role that sport has played in my life, and the whole aspect of wellness and taking care of oneself, and and the impact that has on one's overall well-being and overall ability to perform every day is very important. And what I was saying is that not everybody needs to do a half marathon, because it's very tough, and it's Kevin put me on the road, and I was saying I can't do this, but it actually is doable. But I think just having a bit of fun, smelling the roses, getting into the fresh air, all of those things are value adding to us now. And I think post-COVID, or we can't say post-COVID because we're still in the throes of it, but I think as COVID has taught us, we need to take care of our health, and all of these little bits help to keep us going. Yeah,
you might just have inspired me to do the marathon myself, in the future. Yeah, the other thing I've found when one looks at your life and career trajectory, education has been a constant feature. You are very obsessed with education. I just look at you never stop. University of Western Cape, you go to UNISA, you never stop. You go to Harvard, you go to. Why has education been so central to your life, and how has it changed your life?
Yeah, it sort of emanated most from those very early conversations with my parents around the fact that, from where I am, from where we were located then, that education and continuous learning was going to be very, very important in terms of us lifting ourselves up from the situation that we found ourselves in back then, and that potential opportunities that could emerge from that. But I was always very serious about education, and I became even more serious about it when my father put the matric challenge to us, and also when I had 2 teachers at South Peninsula High, and here I really need to say, that educators play such an important role in our lives. And I'm truly grateful for the two teachers. When I did finally get to matric, they sat me down, Mr. Najan, Mr. Isaacs, and they said to me, you know what? You're not the brightest pea in the pod here, but you have the potential to do much, much more than you think is possible. And I think this is an important lesson for all of us here today, because sometimes we think we have, gotten to a level where we really can't take in anymore, but we have enormous magic and talent and potential right within ourselves. And it can make such a huge difference, not only to our own lives, but to all of those around us, and especially in the country that we live in, where, where one has had so much privilege, one has so much responsibility to give back and make a difference. And so education, I took it quite literally. These teachers said to me, you know what, you're going to go home and have a conversation tonight with your parents about university. And bear in mind that this was never part of our worldview. It wasn't anything that anybody had ever done before or understood, other than it's going to cost money and time to do. And I had the conversation, and I promised that I would do my weekend chores, and I would, do anything that was required of me to make my contribution, and that I would work very, diligently and pass. And so the teachers the next day helped me to apply, with my applications to universities, with apply for a government bursary. And this is where I chose to become a teacher myself, because that was, one of the things that one could actually choose to do during the time. I think you could do education, I think nursing back then, and social work. I'm not sure how they arrived at those things, but I chose, very quickly to tick the teacher box as a first step into a potential degree. And I took it quite literally, because when I finished the one degree, I went from UWC to teach, I decided, well, you finished one, you may as well continue, now that you're on a roll. And it's kind of a thing about, it is possible, even though it seems impossible, it is possible. So I went and I did an honors while I was teaching. And then when I went to UWC to lecture, I did a master's while I was lecturing. And so, and I got the Harvard scholarship, and I thought we just keep going, but it was always work and study at the same time. So it is pretty challenging. But I can say that conversation at an early age with my parents, conversations with those two teachers in matric, changed the trajectory of my life forever. I mean, that conversation with those two teachers took probably all of 5 minutes to do, but it changed my life significantly from from where I might have chosen or landed if I didn't take up the challenge of going to have the conversation about university. And I think what the lesson is here that I've learned is that continuous learning is very, very important, and our own self-driven personal development is very, very important, to stay on top of our game, to continue to learn. And that's why peer networks like this, and learning from each other and engaging through these dialogues, reading, staying abreast of what's happening in the world, studying if you have to do it the formal way, whichever way you choose it. I think continuous learning is very, very important, in not only to stay on top of your game, but to continue to grow and develop and to think, and not only to grow intellectually. I think there are also other elements of growth that are involved here. So it's, we understand now that it's beyond just IQ. We have to have EQ, we have to have, which is emotional intelligence or quotient, you have to have social quotient, you have to have spiritual quotient, you have to have adaptability quotient. All of these elements are what enables us to function in a high-paced, high-changing, turbulent world that we live in. And it's great that we can have platforms like this to share with each other, because we learn from each other in the best possible way through platforms like this.
Yeah. Shirley, I want to move on to the topic of corporate governance, which is your forte. But before I do that, I would like to talk to you about your time at Harvard. This is a tremendous milestone. You're accepted by one of the top Ivy League schools and universities, and you meet some formidable lecturers and scholars, and You enjoy the environment there, but it was not always easy. It was very tough for you, going through a financial crunch, missing Cape Town, missing the weather, because there you had to navigate blizzards and snow and all those things. And it was a very tough time. And what could you please just talk about some of the challenges you faced and some you had to work with your husband, to tackle? How did you survive during those difficult times at Harvard?
Yeah. No, thank you so much, Miles. That is a really good question, because and maybe I must just give you a bit of a pretext to that. So my mother-in-law likes to cut out little articles for me from the newspaper because she thinks I might miss something. And these obviously were the days before social media and email and all of these kinds of things. So she clipped out from the newspaper an article that it was headlined something like, Harvard South African Fellowship now open for application. And I said to my mother-in-law, Jean, I said to her, do you really understand what Harvard is? And I didn't want to kind of overblow it, because I think sometimes we do that to our own detriment. But, she said to me, if you don't apply, you'll never know whether you can get in there. So I'm really grateful to her, because this is one of the people, again, that, sort of believed in me before I believed in myself in this particular instance. Because I was kind of, there is not a chance that, I'll get into this university. And up to, right now, Harvard South African Fellowship still exists. If you Google it, they still send 5 people every year from South Africa to study on various programs, fully covered financially. And I couldn't even imagine, that I never ever needed to worry about money. Just for that 9 months, I didn't have to worry at all about, the financials at the time. It was an absolutely wonderful experience, very nerve-wracking and daunting as well, because there's a lot of self-doubt that goes into, I'm going into some unknown space, navigating some unknown territory, am I going to survive this? Am I going to pass? What happens if I fail and I have to come back here and explain to the world that it didn't work? And I had to put those thoughts, I had to park those thoughts, and I had to focus on actually just getting through the work. And I was surrounded by amazing scholars and students from all over the world. Amazing academics, and I had a supervisor who, during the course of my master's, he actually said to me, what, I know this is your second master's and you're probably going to tell me you want to be done, but you need to come back here and do the doctorate. And I said to him, Professor Willie, I really do need to go home, because I've taken out a whole year, and I've left Kevin back in Cape Town, and there was no WhatsApp and etc. It was only long distance calls that were expensive, and no email, and it was very emotionally challenging as well, just to be there on one's own and understand the gravity of what you're trying to do here. And of course, not to mention the weather, which you already mentioned, which is really a huge challenge. But I think when one is so driven, it's you kind of focus and you say, let me use this opportunity to the very best of my ability. And of course, he encouraged me to do that, into the doctoral program. I applied. Here to Kevin, and as I asked him, would he please come with me to Harvard to do my doctorate? And you can just imagine, your significant other coming home tonight and asking you a question like that, or what would you do? What would you say? And I'm truly grateful for having found a great partner in Kevin, who said to me, that's fine, I'll go with you, and gave up his job. And he was teaching at the time, sold his motorbike and his vinyls and whatever, and came along with me into the unknown. I did not have a scholarship then. And I decided I would have to work 3 jobs as a graduate assistant in various offices and earned my way that way. Took him a long time to get his work permits approved. So 3 or 4 months in, it was financial crash and for us, and I had to go and do the walk of shame and go and sit in the financial aid office and say, I'm very sorry, I haven't paid my bills. And I can't pay it actually. And I think I would have to go home instead. And she looked at my results and she said, well, if you continue to perform in this way, we will assist you. You're going to come here every semester. We're going to have a look at your performance. But we will assist you with your tuition and we will give you 3 teaching fellowships with these 3 professors and you will live. So, I wept and I was so grateful all at the same time and extremely daunted. I would just feel the weight. It's a funny thing when you feel relief and you feel the weight of the pressure at the same time. And I really put my head down and tried to, push hard to finish. And so I started in 93 and finished in 97. And if that wasn't sufficient, we gave birth to our son, Jamie, to whom the book Swimming Upstream is dedicated, gave birth to him in 1995 in the midst of all that. So it's an interesting, additional conversation to have because lots of people want to know, so how did you do that? But it's all detailed there, and I'm happy to share more of that if we have a moment to do so. But it was a very tough personal journey, a very tough journey from the point of view of having a baby in the middle of all of that, and just the financial pressure to actually finish and come back to South Africa as soon as I possibly could.
Now, corporate governance. Shirley, you, as Maurice alluded earlier, you've served on numerous company boards in different industries. And I was reading your book, which is an inspirational book, by the way, over the weekend. I couldn't put it down. And one of the lines that caught my attention in the book was that, and I quote, you state that the boardroom is the place where good governance should prevail, but it is often the battleground where different ideas, ideologies, agendas, often dysfunctional relationships, personalities, and alliances often come into play as decisions are made. Could you please elaborate on this? Why is this the case? And perhaps you could also share with us, having been such an experienced seasoned board member, what would you say, what are the requirements to become an effective board member? What are the do's and what are the don'ts?
Thank you very much, Miles. Yeah, I didn't plan necessarily to become a non-executive director in the way that I did. Probably pretty much as I didn't plan to go into human resource management. I really just wanted to be in education proper. But I think the question about boards is so critical now, given that many challenges that we face on boards and issues of governance and ethics and the duties and responsibilities of boards of directors. And we have the Companies Act, we have the King Codes of Good Practice around governance that requires you to practice a certain code of behavior, and directors are required to act in the utmost good faith and in the best interest of the companies at all times. And all times. And sometimes what worries me is, what is the conversation really about? Is it about us acting in the best interest, or is this driving a particular agenda of, and that is unfolding? And I think, what is also required to be an effective board member is that we're required to exercise diligence and care and promote company success and sustainability over a long term. And we need to apply our independent judgment. And we are finally appointed and accountable. We are accountable. We have to be holding ourselves accountable in terms of the shareholders, whether they be the public, if you are sitting on a public board, or whether it be shareholders, if it's a listed board, a publicly listed board, or if it's an NPO, the communities that you serve. So it's very, very important to understand what it means when you sign up for these things. And I think that this includes taking into account the legitimate needs of not just shareholders, but also broader stakeholders. And I think that element has become much more of an impassioned outcry now, especially, during COVID. We've come to realize how important it is, to take care of our people, put our people first, to take care of our environment. And we have a huge imperative around environmental and sustainable governance, and our social impact, the social justice elements of it all, transformation and community, and impact of business on communities and on society and on supply chains and so on. So it's a huge thing to sign up for, and it's beyond the days of just going to have a nice cup of tea and cake in a boardroom. It is, you have to be seriously well prepared. You have to read your documentation. You have to engage executives. You have to be prepared to ask the tough and challenging questions. You have to think independently and not get caught up in the group think, or not get caught up inside agendas. And you have to be true to yourself and live your values and your purpose in all of that, and ensure that good governance prevails at all times. And so for me, those are what it means to be an effective and to be an exemplary board member. And there are so many do's and don'ts in all of that. And one learns as one goes, or in terms of how do you manage board dynamics, how do you manage the politics, how do you manage sometimes the dysfunctional engagements between people, how do you manage the louder voices and the dominant players, and how do you make sure that you don't get caught up in all of that. And the role of the non-executive director is ever increasing, because it goes beyond now maximizing of profits. There are a whole lot of other elements that we need to take into account, like purpose, like planet, like people. And so there still prevails sometimes a school of thought around, things have worked like this for the last 20 years, and we continue to do it like this, and regardless of digitization and the whole fact that the world has changed quite significantly, and that we have different stakeholders that we are responsible to here now. So I think that we have a big responsibility when we sign up to be on boards, and that we need to understand very clearly what it is and stay true to that cause if we are to build organizations for the future that are fit and that are sustainable and that will make a difference to this world.
All right, there's some comments in the chat box. Mabuto, Mia, what is that scholarship that sends South Africans to Harvard again? I think it's called Harvard South Africa Fellowship. Yes. So you can look it up, Mabuto. You can also go to Harvard if you want to. And then Nonto Dube, did you ever feel daunted, ever feel like it's too much? You almost give up, very inspirational. I think we have addressed that. We have already spoken about how hard it was. And Shirley, you also make a very interesting comment here about board membership, and which caught my eye, where you say that, and I quote, board members lack the emotional maturity to broach difficult subjects, to facilitate the movement of complex negotiation, or to spot a storm brewing and trying to intervene in time. Why is this a problem, and how can it be remedied?
Yeah, I think that sometimes you sit around a table with a group of people that you see from time to time, every few months, Everybody, sometimes we don't have the diversity in the first place that we require around that table. And so everybody just agrees with whoever speaks the loudest or seems to know more, or, and we haven't applied our mind sufficiently to things. And, we just, back down, when somebody is talking too loudly or too much. And I think that that is why we need to have a mix of skills, experience, qualifications, gender, race, ideas, to be innovative, to be creative, and to not keep the status quo and repeat the mistakes of the past. So I think that, there's a big challenge for me around we're not there necessarily to agree, but that we agree to disagree respectfully with each other, and that we always are acting in the very best interests of the organization, and that we ensure that we give and take in these debates, and that also that we have studied our packs, because a lot of it's quite clear that some people come and they haven't properly read through or they read through the pack or take you back to a previous decision, so and try to undo that. So I think diversity and equity and inclusion are key elements in terms of the culture of a board. And it's the most important decision-making body of an organization. It must play an influencing role on the culture of the rest of the organization. And so we need to be mindful of our behaviors, of the way we posture and the way we engage and what we put out publicly, and even your body language when you come out of a boardroom. People kind of what's just been decided, what just happened, and there's so much uncertainty in the system. If we're not leading competently, with capability, with credibility, with purpose, with values, I think we're going to have a real challenge. We are dealing with much bigger matters of social impact here now, of dealing with inequalities, with climate change, with political and regulatory matters. And now we're also dealing with technological issues, and very strongly with people. I mean, every business is 100% about people. It's about employees, it's about suppliers, it's about regulators, it's about communities, it's about broader stakeholders. And so we need to up our EQ. We can't just say, well, I'm great intellectually and I can spin a great story around something, but I need to be able to give and take. I need to be able to listen carefully. I need to be able to collaborate. I need to be able to co-create. And so these are some of the things I think that, in the complex and uncertain and volatile and ambiguous times that we live in, the ability to just listen, just a few little, learnings I think that we can take from some of the tougher experiences that we've seen very well publicized out there, is ability to listen to each other, the ability to give and take, the ability to not win every argument all the time, the ability to think about, the bigger purpose of why we exist and what we're planning to do, and the impact that we're going to have if we go the wrong way, and manage the risks. I think all of those elements are so important, and that this is not about us at all. It's about what we're trying to do to make a difference. And so I think that is what I was trying to articulate in that particular sentence.
All right. The question from Tsidi Molife: do you find that there is a prevalence of young women, 35 and above, sitting in boardrooms? And if not, why do you think is the case? If there is a higher prevalence, do you find that the young people do have a full understanding of what their role is in the boardroom?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and it goes to a lot of the gender issues that that we face in terms of board composition and mix of demographics. I think that, and especially if you look at the generational elements and all those intersectionalities that come with it, we are not doing well in at all. If you look at the statistics, and it's very, very slow progress. Somebody did the math and said, if we continue with this pace, we are never going to get to 50-50 representativity on boards. And that is, if you believe in a world of just male and female, what about LGBTQI plus? What about, every, representativity across all of that? And I think that if you take, a lot of boards have also figured out that we need younger thinkers, younger contributors at the board table, because they are the true leaders here that are going to take us forward in terms of this digital age that we are in. How can we conceive of a business that needs to be digitally capable if we are not, inviting younger people and their ideas, just in general, never mind younger women. So there are a whole lot of elements of this that we need to get right, and the statistics are very, very clear. I'm going to, I've made a few points to myself on a later, point that I want to make about women in the boardrooms. But I think that the point is very well made, that we have a very, very long way to go, and I think that we need to mentor and start preparing and grooming our young leaders for the boardroom, so that they understand what the Companies Act requires of them, they understand what King 4 codes are all about, and that when they get there, they're able to add that value to and bring and raise the bar on governance and all of the other strategic challenges and social challenges that we face. We have a lot of work to do to improve our on that particular score.
Shirley, the Zondo Commission, we've been reading all these voluminous reports produced by the Zondo Commission, and one was published yesterday, which has exposed serious governance failures. And this is not only in government, but also in the corporate sector in South Africa. This is in addition to other serious ethical lapses we witnessed in other companies such as Tonga Hewlett, et cetera, et cetera. How would you, in a nutshell, describe the state of corporate governance in South Africa today? And what do you think needs to be done to restore ethical corporate practices in the private sector? So we know what's happening in the public sector. I would like you to confine yourself to the corporate sector. Yeah.
So I think, there have been some disastrous and spectacular failures in terms of corporate governance, failures on both sides, if you like, and it cuts across public, private. I think, we've seen the Steinhoffs, the Tongarts, the WBSs, the KPMGs. We've seen it, and the fallout is still continuing in some of these spaces. And as the Zondo Commission's reports are emerging, and the investigations that will follow, and the necessary accountabilities and consequence management that will follow, there are a number of lessons that can be drawn from these cases of corporate governance failures. And we really have to introspect very deeply around our CEOs, around our executives, around some of our board members, around our auditors, and what is it that we need to do to fix this huge challenges that we see emerging through corruption, through unethical behavior, and not complying strictly with what the codes require, what the legislation requires, and what our own policies and practices and procedures require. So this corruption kind of contagion runs all the way through, and weak governance leads to greed and opportunities where people think they can fudge the numbers and expose organizations to massive risk and of course add to the ranks of unemployed people when organizations have to shut down. So I think that we need to understand what this breaking the rules for personal gain is all about, and we need to hold people more publicly and more swiftly accountable for mismanagement of funds, of poor governance that destroys companies. And we need to rely more on our codes and our regulators, etc., who should also not be corrupted and the bad actors in all of this. And we need to be able to get comfort out of the systemic things that we have put into place. But I think that we have a lot of work to do in terms of governance, in terms of leadership, ethical leadership, and creating a culture where you don't have a raft of rules and regulations that you don't, implement, and that you turn a blind eye to when people, breach those things. And so I think that there are many lessons that we must learn, and we must learn it very, very quickly, because we cannot continue with a festival of corruption, as somebody said, and we need to take the necessary action and take it very seriously. It's about dishonesty. It's about lack of values. It is about integrity and anti-bribery and anti-corruption. We need to walk away from clients, vendors, companies that conflict with our values and behave in this way. We should not be buying from them or engaging with them in any way. And we must raise potential violations where they become plain and clear to us. A lot of the time, the whistleblowers are worse off for having raised these challenges. And we need to take the time to internalize our policies and escalate breaches where they occur. And of course, we must understand that there's consequences like termination, like reputation, like fines, like prison, waiting for people who are on the take. And so I think that, we have to ask ourselves the big question of where to from here, and how do we ensure governance standards and practices and principles are robust enough, or sustainable enough, or suitably well interrogated, so that they don't impair the work of our organizations and take us down the path that we have been now. So there's a lot of work to do coming out of this commission, and coming out of all the other failures that we have seen over the years. I think we're becoming a bit impatient now as well about the length of time it takes to actually get these things done.
Mm. I want to move on to human capital. So you've worked for many years as a senior human resources leader with a great deal of experience in the field. And I would like to ask you how you think COVID-19 has redefined the human resources function within organizations, and how do you think this will shape the future of the workplace?
I believe that through COVID, we have seen the human resources profession really rise in terms of its contribution to the sustainability of organizations, and to taking care of people during a very, very difficult time. The impact of COVID-19, as well as the fourth industrial revolution, sort of affecting us, the whole value chain, if you like, from the time we attract talent and recruit them, and how we recruit them, and how we develop them, how we reward them, how we do performance management, how we do succession plans, right across the entire value chain. I think we need to, also think about, is the traditional HR framework and models and old policies and traditional approaches, are they still fit for purpose right now? What are the things that have to change? to address things like wellness at work and the hybrid and remote ways of working and all of the challenges that come with having to deal with putting people first and balancing mental health with remote work and compliance with the requirements of our legislation when it comes to safety and the health and well-being of our people, and what does this mean for HR capability? What is the curriculum that we need to shift in terms of how we are training HR professionals? We can't continue teaching them the things that we taught them 5 or even 3 years ago. A lot has changed, and they've had to partner with their CEOs and members of the C-suite to say, what kind of culture do we have to grow in our organizations around the new challenges of work that we are facing in this current environment. We started to talk now about, there are lots of very complex conversations about return to work policies, about who works fixed remote, who works hybrid remote, and there are all sorts of new nomenclature and language coming into how we work in this future of work. What are the digital tools that we need to give to people? Are we making sure that we are engaging people, especially those not coming into the office as regularly as they would have been coming versus those who do, and how are we still creating diversity, equity, and inclusion across all of that, and create especially belonging for people who don't necessarily come to the office. So I think that the matter of purpose has also come very clearly onto the table in the last many months, especially as we start to ask ourselves some of these highly existential questions about, why are we here? Are we, we can't even talk about work-life balance. There's no such thing really, because now there's a big blur. Most of us are sitting doing this from home now, and we thought we could go back, some of us, and now we're looking at a potential, fourth wave coming at us. We're not sure what that exactly means, but it's a constant stop, start, continue process. And how do we ensure that HR professionals are influencing and leading organizations effectively to make the very best decisions and to care for their people in a very different way, perhaps. And I know, Mills, we sit in board meetings and, we can talk about, I remember many years ago talking about care and talking and daring to say a word like that around a board table is quite a, I don't know if it's bold or dangerous or what it is to do, but people now understand that, this, what we used to call, and it's a very sad concept of soft skills, is now, very seriously at the forefront of skills that we need to hone in order to be able to and having the technical skills is a given. It's the kind of leadership that shows empathy, that shows compassion, that shows thoughtfulness, that shows care, and that gets results ultimately. It's not the command and control that doesn't trust their people. We still have an office-centric approach. I hear some of the talk about people must come back to work. And we need to see them so that we know that they're working. But they trusted them throughout COVID to keep their organizations afloat. So when are we actually going to reach a point where we can create a culture where everybody can thrive and the organization is led by people with these sort of capabilities that can create collaboration, can create cooperation and cohesion, and be creative with all of the challenges that we're currently facing.
All right, Shirley, I would like to explore this theme of diversity, transformation, and inclusion further. But before I do that, I would like to take two comments, which I think are related. So I'll read both of them, the questions, and then you can answer both of them. in one go. So the one from Cheryl N, some thoughts on how to get our country or next generation to some sort of values-based leadership to address the corruption in the country. And then the other one is from Dr. Richard, who's asking Dr. Zinn, how to ensure compliance? The levels of poor governance is escalating, and too few examples of consequences are being heard of. Hence, the status quo remains, and the honest ones are being marginalized.
Yeah, I think I agree with that last point, especially around the consequence management. I think that there've been so many investigations and so much has been uncovered, and I think every person is waiting, for when we will see, some of these leaders who still exude arrogance and still walk around as if they're untouchable, despite the fact that they're clearly, being, and this is fact and data. It's not emotion. It's, they've been found, to be wanting in terms of the governance and of fraud and of misappropriation of funds and all sorts of other malfeasance. And we can talk the talk, but we actually need to see that we are dealing decisively. We have a tendency, with our leadership currently to be consensus seeking, to want to work our way through every layer of a process that is clearly telling us already what the key themes are, and that we need to move this thing, accelerate this thing to closure. And I think that that while consensus seeking is important, I think that we need to move to action and implementation, and because leadership and this this kind of leadership, this corrupt leadership and this unethical leadership impacts people's lives and livelihoods every day. And we really cannot morally be standing by and just hoping somehow that something will happen. I think we need to have the courage and the conviction, as somebody said, from courage to conviction, to saying, well, if you need to face the consequences of your action here, and we need to actually say we can't consult ad infinitum. We also need to take charge and be decisive and lead with courage. And so I think that is the kind of strength and quality of leadership that we need now in order to be able to deal with the current situation and not have it lag on, in perpetuity, and people actually get away. And those are the role models then that everybody thinks, well, if this works for these people, then it needs to work for us as well. And we need to put up really good role models out there. I just lost sight of your earlier question.
The first one is about values. How do we inculcate values-based leadership in society?
Yeah, values-based leadership and purpose-driven leadership is very, very important. Understanding, well, I think, first of all, we must understand our own personal purpose. It starts with the inner work. It starts with your own personal journey, with us asking ourselves as leaders, and we all are leaders in various ways, not necessarily because we are CEOs or board members, but we lead from where we are. And we need to ask ourselves, what are the things that get us up in the morning? What are the things that drive us? And what kind of world would we like to see left behind? If we are truly to create a better world, what is each of our own purposes in this? Do we want to leave the world in a better place? Do we want to create a world where there's hope and there's healing for people? Do we want to create a place where everybody can fairly participate actively in a thriving economy? Do we want to, put in, the digitization that we need to in order for us to create the jobs and to deal with the poverty and the unemployment. What are the things that how do we do that inner work? And as Richard Barrett, for some of those of you who might have read his works, he's written a book called Liberating the Corporate Soul. He talks about organizations don't change, people do. And it starts with each one of us saying, what difference can I make to the world through what I do? And I think maybe just to share something quite personal from my own sense of purpose is that it's seriously huge curveballs come our way in life, and we learn from them. And I had to learn from a very serious and devastating tragedy of losing our only child in that car accident in 2003 when he was 7 years old. And I had to get up from my 24 hours touch and go scenario for myself and ask myself, what is the meaning of your life, Shirley Zinn? Why are you here? What is it that you've been left to do? And I had to be able to answer that question and say, I'm here because I want to make a difference. What is that difference? I've been privileged to have enormous, wonderful education and career. I can infuse, the whole idea of creating a better world through education, through unlocking human potential. I can infuse that in everything I do every day. And if that is my purpose, then I must make sure that every day when I put my head down on that pillow, that I've actually done that, because otherwise I haven't lived my purpose. And so sometimes through crisis, we learn what our purpose is. And many of us have faced many crises over the last 2 years. We've lost loved ones. We are still grieving. Many of us are still ill. And many of us have lost our financial footing. Some of us have lost our jobs. It's been an incredibly challenging time and devastating time for people. And we need to recognize that. And I think that once, as Richard Barrett says, once our personal values are aligned with the organization's values in which we work in, that is when we can really, make the difference, because then, you're living a more synergistic life, and we don't have to talk about work-life balance, because there's no such thing, because life is about all the whole variety of things that we have to do every day, and we can't cut things up into little hours and say, now I'm working and now I'm living. It's much more complex than that. But the point is about values. Values-driven organization. It is very, very important that once we put those values up on the wall, that as leaders, we are living it in everything that we do and say every moment of the day. It is not an event to do this. And so I've appreciated, what is possible when we are all aligned to when we talk about integrity, when we talk about excellence, when we talk about respect, and a lot of organizations have very similar themes coming out of the value statements, and how that impacts and resonates with myself as a board member and employee, and how I see that lived every day, that resonance makes me want to be part of that. And so I think that values are very powerful, and it's very connected, and it anchors us, and it drives our purpose, and it drives our behaviors. And I think those things are very, very important to make sure that we get that right in our organizations.
So Shirley, you have overcome many formidable hurdles to become one of successful businesswomen in South Africa. And you have stated that one of the reasons for your success is that you have refused to allow yourself to be defined by the concept of a glass ceiling. I would like you to please elaborate on what you mean by this, and link to the second question, which is a related question. We have also remarked that the biggest fear of female senior executives is the fear of failure. You've had your own fears, you've had your own self-doubts, you've had your own setbacks. How have you spotted these? How do you spot these fears, doubts, setbacks, and how do you manage them? What kind of advice would you give to aspiring female executives about handling fear, managing fear?
Thank you so much.
The first one, the glass ceiling one.
Yes, I will start with the glass ceiling. So,
Yeah.
I didn't want to be defined by the concept of a glass ceiling. And a glass ceiling is really about unseen barriers that impact, that create an inaccessible set of barriers, especially for women, that is cumulative and compounded, throughout their lives, that prevents them from, progressing personally in their personal growth and in their professional growth. And so we have to understand that much like racism, sexism is still a very real and live element of what we are addressing in our society. Patriarchy runs very, very deep, and the numbers are very clear. If we look at how slow the progress has been, as we were saying earlier, it's a glacially slow process. And we know that gender-based violence and femicide has also raised its horrible head during, even more significantly during COVID. And why is it that we need to accept that there's so many obstacles and barriers and discrimination still in play all these years after the Employment Equity Act, after the BE Act, and all sorts of JSE listing requirements, and even some of our social norms and behavior and our gender role expectations, even during COVID, became very clear again who was doing the double shift, and the unequal opportunities for development and promotion and progression, not to mention the pay gaps, which are just unacceptable. As somebody said, we all need to be outraged by this. It just cannot be possible. And as Prof. Maurice was saying earlier, we have daughters as well. We didn't want to be sitting here in the next 10, 20 years still having the conversation. So it's a heavy burden, the exclusion that people face, and the disparities that we face. And it's a reality. And so one has to call those things out when we see it, and we need to nip it in the bud. And we need to hold people accountable for behaviors that create barriers, or and there's microaggressions, that are at play, So there's nothing worse than an unseen barrier, or a intangible little snipe at someone, or a little microaggression that gets played out every day so that people can be excluded, but that everybody can think that everything's okay, and you can put the sugar coat on the top, and we all move on. So I think that it's upon us. It's our responsibility to call it out. If it's not acceptable, we must stop that, because otherwise it is never going to fix itself. And I think it's incumbent upon men and women. I think there are many of our male folk, and again, I have to look at across the whole intersectionality piece, that support fairness. They are fair in their behavior. They are equitable in their behavior. They are transparent, and they genuinely want to create a society based on these democratic principles, and have supported and sponsored and been advocates for women. So as men and women who believe in fairness and equity and in these sorts of principles and values, we need to join hands and say that we need to create a better world here. We cannot continue excluding 50% of our population. We cannot continue with this poor behavior towards a segment of society based on antiquated policies, processes, practices, behaviors, and hide it somehow in some way to make it feel like it's actually okay to do this. So I think there's still a lot of that goes on, and I think that we must be far more vigilant, and we must be far more, because it's easier to look away than to actually call it out. And I think that if all of us start to call it out, it becomes easier to completely terminate and stop this kind of behavior. So so for me, the career advice I would give is, I've had my own share of fears and setbacks and self-doubt, and huge anxiety and worries about imposter syndrome. Am I good enough? Am I going to fail tomorrow? Surely you have every qualification in education, but you've never done one qualification in HR. What are you doing? Going to head up HR in a huge organization. What are you out of your mind? But it is using every opportunity as a foundation to learn, to grow, and to do your own homework and to be self-driven in your learning, as I was saying. So none of us are ever going to be perfect for every job description that you find. Somebody is going to have to support us. Somebody is going to have to make a way for us. Somebody's going to have to open that door for us. And so I believe if you're really being the best you can be and not trying to be perfect, and you are believing in yourself and trusting yourself to do and to step up, and take that calculated risk. You mustn't take crazy risks and put yourself and fall over completely. But sometimes we just have to get out of that comfort zone a little bit, to say, let me give this a try and see what I can do. I think the other thing I would advise is to surround yourself with people who will uplift and inspire you and sponsor you, and take you forward, and find mentors. And our mentors, I want to say to people that they don't have to be this formal thing where I see you once a month and for 1 hour and and so on. Sometimes it can just be a 5-minute conversation. Sometimes it can just be a quick WhatsApp. Sometimes it can be something very informal that somebody says to you that you remember years later that moved the dial for you significantly. So it is just, we inherit a lot of people that can be toxic, that can be negative, that can be naysayers and say, no, you shouldn't think about doing a doctorate. Oh no, you should not think about being a head of HR or board member. What if you fail? You need to deliberately choose the few people, the 2 or 3 people, men and women, who will uplift you and inspire you and move you along, and give you the confidence to believe in yourself as well. And you must also be in tune with your own intuition. I think that's very, very important. When you start feeling that negative self-speak coming, you must notice it and say, so what does this mean? And sometimes you need to hear it because it's trying to warn you that something's coming, but also it prepares you for, all right, I know I'm taking on something big here. Let me prepare and be even more aware of what is happening. Also continue to learn and invest in your own personal development, and seek out how you spend your time. Spend your time wisely. I had to learn through my own crisis and devastation of losing Jamie that we're not here forever. We're not here indefinitely. Every minute of every day counts in terms of what it is that we do, whether we're having fun, whether we are studying, whether we are working, whether we're having a conversation. Give it all that you've got, because we don't know from day to day. We can't live our days also like it's going to end every minute. But live your best life that you possibly can in order to thrive, in order to feel that you're not just in survival mode all the time. And yes, and if you fall over, which you will, you get up and you reach out to those people who will support you, and you seek help. But that's the other thing that I had to learn, is that we don't seek help. We think we're superhuman. We don't, you don't have a culture of where we go and say, I need help. We think we can, like I did, just go back to work, like, carry on. Not like nothing happened, but you think you can just move it. I can never get over the loss, but I can put one foot in front of the other every day, and I can work through the pain and the devastation and move myself forward. But I cannot do that alone. I need to have my colleagues, my family, my loved ones around me in order to do that. And these are the things that I want to encourage us as young leaders, as current leaders, to do in order to remain actively optimistic in a world that is so challenging?
Talking about family, about colleagues, and support. Shirley, when one looks at your life and career journeys, one cannot help but observe that there have been men, inspirational and good men, who have played a very prominent role in influencing your career success. Ranging from your father, your husband Kevin, including corporate and political leaders such as Pravin Gordhan and Tom Bodman, the former CEO of Nedbank. What roles did these men play in influencing your career, and why do you put so much store in having them, surround you?
Mills, that's a really great question, because I think that a lot of us think that that gender issues are women's issues only, and it's a women's issue to fix the gender problems of society. And in the first place, we haven't necessarily created them, and in the second place, we all are co-responsible for building a better world and leaving a legacy. So for me, I think that as men and women, we have an obligation to work together to build this better world as was envisaged and enshrined in our constitution, if not for ourselves, and at least for our own children and their children. And so I think that there are women and men in all of our lives, in my life too. And there in particular have been men that I have called out and I have shown distinct gratitude for the opportunities that and the hand up that they have given me when I didn't think I could take that step. And it's a world where patriarchy runs so deep, as I was saying earlier. There are men who truly want to shift away from a world that treats women in the way that it does, looks the other way when there's gender-based violence, and just atrocious behavior towards women. And there are men that I have to be deeply grateful for today, who have come into my life at different points, and who have steered me, who have guided me, who have given me direction, who have given me support, who have said, just the right word at the right time. And I remember going to SARS at a particular point of my life when we had the accident, and my confidence was at an all-time low. I didn't even think I could go for an interview or go back to anything. I had to give up my role at Reckitt Benckiser, where I was head of Africa, Middle East for multinational FMCG, because I just couldn't travel and be away from South Africa. And I didn't ever think I was going to be able to pick myself up again. And when I finally struck up the courage because of some search firm that said, you must just go and meet them, it gave me that little push to say, all right, just meet them. You don't have to say yes or no. And then you set aside someone who's incredibly, driven in an entity like SARS back in the early 2000s to say, would you like to join us and see how the journey goes? And it just, I just wasn't sure that I could actually do that. And so it was an incredible journey for me just to get back into the space again. But I think what I'm trying to say is that there are men and women who are out there who support us that sometimes we don't even see or know exist, because we're not listening to the messages that people are trying to give us, so we don't hear it for whatever reason. So I just want to encourage all of us, men and women in the room here today, to be more gracious to each other, be more supportive, be more play a more of an advocacy role for this equity that we need to find in the world, because our equity and our journey towards respecting each other and supporting each other is also a journey about our own human sustainability on this planet. If we don't do this and we don't connect on our common humanity, then I think we really are going to have we're not going to achieve the sustainability goals that we have set for ourselves. So I think this social engagement that enables learning from each other, that enables support, that we get affirmation, and we can, depend on people and rely on people to support us and be there for us. I think this is such an important thing that we've missed in a world of command and control and of lack of trust. And you can't tell people things because you can't make yourself vulnerable. I think what COVID has taught us that we can actually do this. And I think what we must do now is to use this opportunity and continue to forge a better way forward together as men and women on this planet.
All right. Shirley, you have swum upstream, and you have said yourself that swimming upstream has been a constant throughout your entire life. Grit has pulled you through. But, not everybody can swim upstream. There are some people, not everybody can be Shirley Zinn. Okay, you've achieved so much against heavy odds. You've been persistent. You've gone through so much ordeals and emerged strong. What advice would you give to those, who are trying their best, to succeed in life, but they cannot swim upstream as you have done? What advice would you give to them?
Thank you, Wills. I want to say that as human beings, we have amazing capacity for resilience, the ability to overcome trauma, tragedy, rejection, and emerge even stronger than before and not less diminished. So I want to encourage us on that particular element. We have enormous resilience within us, and I had to find that out as I navigated through the complexities that I face. I also want to say that none of us are perfect, and we learn. It comes down to we're here to learn every day. It's about education. It's about I must learn from my mistakes. I must apologize where I need to, where I've hurt people or done something that I shouldn't have done, and that I must continue to learn from that, and that sometimes the seemingly impossible is actually possible. I'm stealing the words of the great Madiba here now, but it's sometimes, this mountain thing that we climb and we see the many more mountains to come. We can do this if we are living our values, we anchored in our values, and we have a purpose, especially if we have a higher purpose beyond ourselves, beyond the year and now, beyond the immediate challenges that we face, and we want to truly leave a legacy. And so it's a constant process of being and becoming and refining and honing your intellectual, emotional, social, and spiritual, whatever that might mean to you, yourself, in the context of the bigger world and in your relationships with other people. And so I think that sometimes I wish I could have been bolder and braver, and but I do know that we in very, very complex times now, and we absolutely need each other to navigate through all of the transitions that we are facing right now, and that there are great success stories out there of people. And it depends, of course, how you want to define success. But I think that the future, as I said in some other contexts, is human. even if it's going to be uniquely digital and uniquely human. That's the bottom line of where we are all at. And we need to make sure that we live with conviction, that we do leadership practices that will positively impact lives and livelihoods for a very long time to come.
All right, Shirley, that's how we come to the end of our conversation. But before we conclude, I would like to read two messages, one from Cheryl N. Thank you for addressing the values, purpose, and fears, doubts, questions so openly and personally. Ms. Zinn, that was very profound and touching. Another one from Prudence Tipe. Great message, Shirley, about being in tune, know and understand that there are people out there willing to assist and push us forwards. Let's be willing to engage and to be open to possibilities. And Solo Fellow, thank you, Shirley, for sharing so candidly regarding values, leadership, gender equality in the boardroom, and how you used your personal lows and highs to emerge strong in corporate South Africa. So those are the messages of appreciation and praise for you, Shirley. It's 5:30, so that's how we come to the end of this afternoon's conversation with our guest, Dr. Shirley Zinn, author, business leader, coach, trailblazer. Shirley, thanks hugely for sharing with us such fascinating, inspiring, and instructive insights. And thanks for your leadership and service to our country. I strongly recommend this powerful and inspirational bestseller by Shirley titled Swimming Upstream. Is it available? Where is it available from, Shirley? If somebody wants to buy it?
You can get it at takealot.com, amazon.com, and exclusive books nationwide.
All right. Okay. Thank you. In closing, I would like to thank everyone in the audience who attended and participated in this event. I would like to thank in particular my colleagues at Wits Business School who have worked behind the scenes to make this event a reality. Jayton Carson, Alison Gaylord, Rutendo Ngumalo, Tembega Hlochwayo, Ikeleng Ramayema, and Ruhani Magaba. Thank you, everyone, and good evening. Thank you. Thank you, Shirley.
Thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you so much.
All right.
Well.